Okay, so welcome to our Mid-Autumn Festival program. I get to do this program at my wonderful mother-in-law's house. So we have lots of, really classic cooking utensils, which is really fun. Today we're going to be making snowskin mooncakes, which is a mooncake edition with mochi instead of the traditional outer covering that uses golden syrup. And we're going to be doing pumpkin filling instead of the traditional lotus filling. There's like the lotus paste filling that is in traditional mooncakes. Pumpkin is an acceptable alternative. I got this recipe as a combination between the pumpkin version, pumpkin mochi version that was on Walks of Life, and the regular snowskin mooncakes mochi. This is very allergy friendly, except if you have a gluten intolerance. So I apologize for that. And I believe there are some substitutes for the milk, but you'll have to experiment with them on your own to see whether or not they're what you're looking for. So the first thing that we're supposed to make is the pumpkin puree. So we had a pumpkin can, and we had the bag full of sugar and cinnamon. All you had to do was melt 1.5 tablespoons of butter into a medium-sized pan at medium heat. You can dump all of the pumpkin in there, all of the sugar and cinnamon, and you cook while stirring for 25 minutes. And the light colored pumpkin will turn into this dark, creamy, sweet, almost pumpkin pie filling type of filling. And it's very thick. You're going to keep that in the fridge. You do want it to be completely cool before you start stuffing your mochi with it, so that everything's kind of the same temperature and they're easier to work with. So that is the pumpkin filling. We're not going to do a demonstration of that now because I had to do it in advance. But if you have any questions about the pumpkin filling, you can let me know. There's plenty of alternative fillings that if you want to try a different one. Pumpkin is the most easily gettable, so you can get pumpkin anywhere, especially in this season. But if you want to go to a different store and get something else, the other editions of the fillings that you can do are on thewalksoflife.com. So that's our great inspiration. So pumpkin aside, I have chilled this pumpkin for about 3 hours, so it's fully cooled down. And we're going to move on to mochi. So mochi is a glutinous rice, kind of uncooked food. I mean, it's cooked, but it's only through steaming process. There are some ways to pan fry it, but it won't have the same texture. So what we're going to be doing is we're using glutinous rice flour, which is labeled GRF on your packet, rice flour, which is labeled RF, and wheat starch. The alternative to wheat starch is cornstarch, but it will make it slightly less translucent and more of a cloudy type of mochi. For snowskin mooncakes, we are looking for that translucent quality to our wrapping. All right, so the first thing that we're going to be doing, these all have to go together at the same time, so we're going to put them aside. You'll also have something labeled extra. I'll show you what to do with that soon. We have the big bag of powdered sugar. You're going to dump it into a container, and then you're going to add 1/2 cup milk plus 1/3 cup whole milk. And we're going to stir that together. And I've got a larger bowl somewhere. There it is. So we're going to use this larger bowl to combine everything. The reason why I'm using this larger bowl is because this is just the right size for everything that we're going to use. It's a glass bowl, so that means it's heat resistant, but not heat proof. So keep that in mind. There's a couple of things that we'll be doing to make sure that there's no cracking in the glass. Because if you heat glass, to a high temperature after being at room temperature, it will crack and you'll have a shatter problem that you'll have to deal with. So we're going to do our best to avoid that. So I have milk, and then I've got slightly less than 2 tablespoons oil. Stir these together. And what we're going to do is we're going to add all those 3 packets together into one bowl. So we're going to add the wheat starch into a dry bowl. The glutinous rice flour. Now, if you are going on the walksoflife.com, you'll notice that everything is in weight measurements. I have translated that into cup measurements and tablespoon measurements for easier access. But if you want something that's very specific, then I recommend going with the weight measurements that are on the traditional recipe. But this is a little bit more accessible, I think, for people. Okay, so I have kind of mixed this in. This is a simple sieve. So I'm just shaking it in a little bit, mixing it in a little bit so it doesn't get clumpy. You're going to want to scrape everything off of the sides because we want to make sure that this is all incorporated. Now, the big difference between snowskin mooncakes and traditional mooncakes is not just the mochi, it's the shelf life. So if you have mooncakes that you buy off of the shelf packet, prepackaged, those can last up to a year because golden syrup has a really high preservation quality. Whereas mochi, the longest this will last you is 2 days. It could last you up to a week, but I don't recommend it. You'll have some pretty dry mochi to deal with, even if you coat it in lots of rice flour. Right, we're almost about done with this. Now, when you're doing this recipe, I did not say this on the sheet itself, but it's best to have about 3 hours kind of set out so you can do everything from beginning to end. It says till after you've finished steaming the mochi for a good bit, you'll have to let it cool in the refrigerator. And that will take at least an hour. So this is kind of an abbreviated demonstration of what exactly you need to do at home. And this is definitely a fun activity to do with multiple people because you can have one person in charge of the pumpkin filling. It can have one person in charge of the mochi side of things. And then at the end, everybody can handle it and make a mess. It's definitely a lot of fun to handle mochi because it's a lot like Play-Doh, but more delicious. Okay. So here we have our mochi mixed together. And the goal is to place a plastic wrap over this and let it settle for 30 minutes. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be letting it settle into my steamer dish. So I'm going to have it prepped and ready to steam for when I want to. So that means I'm going to have this plastic wrap, make sure it's not touching the bottom and that it's wrapped tightly around the sides. Since you'll probably have sieved a lot into this, the sides are probably going to be a little bit dirty. So just make sure that it's a tight fit. If you want to make sure that there's no extra steam getting into there, you can put a rubber band around it. So it's not touching the bottom, the plastic, and we're going to actually be heating it with the plastic on top. So I'm going to place this. This is completely cool. Like I mentioned, because we're going to be using glass, we want this to heat up at a very regular, steady pace. So this is a cooled pan. And then we're going to set a timer for about 25 minutes so that we have some flex time for the pan to heat up. Okay, so we're going to set it aside and set a timer. Right now it's 3:42, so we'll just think 25 minutes after that. After 25 minutes, you can turn it on. I have, for a regular steamer, I have about 2 fingers worth of water in there. That will last you 25 minutes without running out. If you have a different setup for your steaming, if you have like a larger pot base and just a steamer set out, I still would recommend that 2 fingers length of water in the pot. Cool, not hot. So that's going to set aside for 25 minutes. At 25-minute mark, I'm going to heat it up. And then once it is steaming, that's when we're going to set our 25-minute timer, because that's when the glutinous rice is starting to cook and combine with the oil, and we'll turn it into something delicious. So I'm going to go ahead and grab our completed project. So when you take it out of the pan, you're going to stir it with a fork. It's going to be kind of a clumpy, weird, sticky texture. So just stir it until it's cool enough to handle. And then what you're going to do is plop it onto a plastic surface. So you can use wax paper or plastic wrap. Plastic wrap sticks much more easily to a stone or plastic surface. But wax paper is just as fine. If you have a silicone mat, do that too, because that's also going to help. You're going to put it down on this surface. And what I did is I used a plastic wrap mitt to cover my hand, because you don't want to handle mochi with just your hand, or you're going to waste a lot of mochi sticking to your hand. And this recipe does an exact quantity of 500 grams, 500 grams of mochi, 500 grams of pumpkin, because they have to be an equal combination when you put them together. And I do want to show you one of our completed projects. So this, I didn't put the rice flour on the bottom yet, but you can see that this is a pretty good result. Let me make sure that this is dusted. Now this is actually a perfect time to let you know what we're going to be doing with that extra. So that's waiting, then it will be heated up. And then once it's heated up, we'll take it out, cool it down, knead it, put it in the fridge for an hour to 2 hours. And in the meantime, we have the extra bag. So this extra bag, you're going to take a clean pan. There's no oil in it, it's completely dry. And we're going to set this to a medium-low heat. Kind of let it warm up a little bit. And this is extra rice flour. If you have extra glutinous rice flour, that will also work. We just need something that kind of can get heated up and used for the powdering surface of our presses. So I'm going to go ahead and pour this out. And what you want to do is you want to constantly be moving it. So I let it sit for a minute. So the maximum number of minutes that you want this to do is 7 minutes at a medium to low heat. And then you want to make sure it's all stirred up. You will start to get an aromatic smell from it and a little bit of a smoke if it's starting to burn. We're kind of getting it to that point where it's just between like dark and light. So you'll see that this is the completed powder that I have. It's just a little bit yellow, like a little bit tan. It's like an off-white eggshell color, whereas the original one is going to be pure white. So just as a double check, these are ingredients. I used Mochiko sweet rice flour. We have wheat starch. We have regular rice flour, confectioner's sugar, whole milk, and canola oil are what I've been using for my samples. And we're ready to start. Oh, gotta shake this. So that, I'm actually gonna turn that off because you know the demonstration of what we're doing, but I have prepped material here. And now, oh, do we have a chat question? Yes, so the recording will be shared afterwards, so you guys can go through and repeat this in perpetuity. So now we have, this is the big mochi slice that I made earlier. So once it's complete, it'll be kind of this stretchy dough. Very exciting. I'm going to use my plastic glove mitt. I'm going to make sure that I have enough for two. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a tablespoon and a half and just rip it off. So I've got my tablespoon here. And what I want to do is we want it to be kind of a molded round shape over. This is about a teaspoon and a half. It makes a round shape around it. There we go. And then I'm going to take my other one and I'm just going to press it into my palm. When we're looking at 3 inches, it's actually the length of your finger. So if you're using these smaller molds, this will make a perfect size mochi that to fit into this mold. So you're going to press it into a 3-inch round circle, trying to make sure that it is completely even in all aspects, or else you have some thin parts where the pumpkin will bleed through. All right, so it doesn't have to be perfect all the way around. Just kind of pressing it between them and rubbing it in a circle to make sure I'm getting even spots. And then I've got a nice palm size, finger length size. I'm going to do a rounded spoonful of pumpkin filling right in the middle. So equal amounts mochi to filling, no matter what filling you're using. And pumpkin filling is absolutely delicious, by the way, so big fan. And then what we're going to do is we're going to press it in a little bit around the edges. Going to make sure that it folds over. And we're just tucking the corners in together. The edges are going to be thicker. And you can do a traditional dumpling like tuck and pinch if you'd like. But all you have to do is get it sealed with no filling leaking out. So you can see my little mess that I made, just a little packet. And I'm going to then coat this mold. Usually you'll have a couple of different options. And we're going to coat this mold with our dusting powder, which is just the cooked rice flour that we made. We want to make sure that it gets into all the cracks. And then just give it a little tap to make it sure that there's not too much in there to kind of obstruct the mold shape. And then we're going to make sure that the sides are all covered. Mochi is super sticky. That's why we have to do this. All right, so I'm going to put it in with the top part first. You put your mold into the press. And then you're going to put your mochi into the mold. Just a nice little packet inside. Kind of let it fall in on its own. You're going to use the plastic wrap surface to press down to make sure it's all even on the sides. And then there's little slots as you press down. You want them to stick out because I'm starting to feel some resistance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this up. And then we're going to, there's a little hook here so you can grab it with your hands. Oh, it's sticking. Well, ease it out a little bit if you have to. Mine's sticking just a little bit too much. There we go. And there you have your perfect little snowskin mooncakes. These don't have to be baked except for the steam part at the beginning. And they're ready to eat as soon as you shape them. So watch your plate very carefully or else you run out. All right, so I'm going to finish the recording here. Thank you so much. But as soon as I finish the recording, I'll open it up to general questions and we'll make some more mochi mooncakes. Thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now.